Introducing Tush, the ultimate swimbait hook. Tush puts the junk in the trunk of your swimbait, giving it an irresistible side-to-side swing that drives bass wild. Stop struggling with that awkward muffin top of lead bulging out the top of your swimbait. Tush hides away all that excess weight to complement any swimbait physique, petite or curvy. But don't just take my word for it. Here's professional bass fisherman Matt Steffen.
Before Tush, bass wouldn't even look in my direction. My swimbaits had weight in all the wrong places. Those were some tough years. But since Tush, my swimbaits are leaner, more compact, and have that side-to-side wiggle that the bass just can't keep their eyes off of. It's taken my swimbait fishing to the next level. Thanks, Tush.
And there you have it. Turn your swimbait game around today and start attracting all the bass you've always dreamed about. Get Tush today.
I'm just looking for some touch.
Well, there you go, guys. The newest release from Core Tackle, Tush, the ultimate swimbait hook. So you can see Matt and I had a little bit of fun with that intro, and now I want to get into some of the reasons why we feel like the Tush is going to improve your swimbait fishing over your standard jig head that most guys use when fishing a swimbait. Let me quickly explain how you rig the Tush hook. Basically, all you're going to do is insert the hook point into the top of your swimbait, just like you do with a standard jig head. You're then going to push the swimbait up the shank of the hook until the nose of the bait covers the first cone of the hook. You're then going to bring the hook point through the bait and then just thread that bait all the way up until it covers all of the lead. When you're done, you shouldn't see any lead on the shank of the hook. That nose of the swimbait should be covering that up, and it conceals all of the lead on the hook inside of the swimbait. This has several advantages over a standard swimbait jig head where all the lead is outside of the swimbait. First, you're going to get a different action from Tush than a standard jig head. Whenever you're fishing with a jig head like this is a 3/4 ounce Picasso jig head on a 5.8 inch Kitech Fat Impact swimbait. And what you'll find is that these jig heads are going to promote a lot of tail movement. The tail is going to move quite a bit, and you're also going to get a lot of head movement from the swimbait. So most of your action is going to be coming from the tail and the head. With Tush, the weight is transferred to the body of the bait, and therefore you get a lot more roll from the actual body of the swimbait. What this means is that you're going to get a very different action from your bigger swimbaits and your smaller swimbaits. By redistributing the weight, the body of that swimbait is going to swing and move a lot more while having a little bit less tail action and a little bit less head movement. It's pretty interesting because we've had these baits in prototype for over a year now, and when I first got them, when I threw them out, I felt like the bait was vibrating way more than usual, and it almost felt like I was fishing a mini chatterbait. And I wasn't sure what was going on there until I put it under the water, and really what's happening is that belly or body of the swimbait is moving so much more, and it's really giving off a different feel and vibration compared to when you're just fishing on a standard jig head. It's almost like there's a little bit more resistance from the bait as you're bringing it in, and you really have to see it in the water like in some of these slow-mo images and feel it on your rod to understand what I'm talking about. And at the end of the day, it gives any swimbait you use with Tush a very different action from what fish are used to seeing, just because you're distributing that weight into the body of the bait. This is really important when you're fishing in highly pressured situations. I'm on Beaver Lake all the time in Arkansas, which has tons of boats on it, also Grand Lake. And when these fish are seeing hundreds of swimbaits every single week, having a bait with a slightly different action or movement can generate a few extra bites. As a lot of you guys know, actually, who follow my channel, I switched a long time ago from the Kitech style swimbaits to like Megabass Spark Shads and other different swimbaits because I felt like these fish were getting conditioned to these standard rib swimbait designs because so many companies now make a bait like this. But since I've been throwing the Tush, I've actually gone back to throwing the Kitech a lot more often, and I find that I'm getting bit just as well as I was 10 years ago with the Kitech because, again, that bait just feels different on the rod, it looks different underwater, and I think these fish are just not used to it. And also I think a lot of guys are sometimes going away from the Kitex to throw different baits to kind of get away from the fishing pressure with them. And now you can kind of go back to that style of bait with a little bit different hook, redistributes the weight, gives these fish a different look. And I'm not saying it's going to completely change the game and make the Kitex as good as it was when it first came out, but I feel like it definitely brings it back into my arsenal. Now I find myself picking it up a lot more than I was, let's say, in the last 3 or 4 years. In addition to giving the Swimbait a different action, you also are going to get better hookup ratios if you're fishing a bigger swimbait like this 5.8 Kitech, because you don't have such a big mass of lead on the head of the bait. When the bait has a lot of lead at the front, it will pop the fish's mouth open when you set the hook, and it can cause those fish to just let go of the bait. You won't get a hook in them, and you'll miss a lot of fish on these bigger swim baits. And also they'll get more leverage because all that weight is at the head. So if you do hook into them, a lot of times they'll throw it halfway to the boat. And I've lost some pretty big fish on these paddle tail swim baits, especially the bigger ones, just because there's so much leverage on that head. But with the tush, the weight is inside the bait, so they get less leverage. They don't have their mouth popped open with a big chunk of lead, and you can stick them a lot easier. There are 3 different sizes in the tush. We have the 7/0 3/4 ounce, which is great for your bigger swim baits, like the Scottsboro 6-inch hand-poured swim bait. You saw in the little intro teaser, the Megabass Mag Draft Freestyle. This is an awesome little bait. It's actually a pretty big bait on that 7/0 3/4 ounce hook. And basically you can throw these baits a lot deeper than you normally could with like a standard mag draft, or just like a belly weighted flashy swimmer hook that's like 3/8 of an ounce. If you guys are fishing ledges this summer, you can catch some absolute tanks dragging this thing and slow rolling it on offshore ledges with this heavier hook. Just slow roll it down there, kind of creep the bottom, and they will absolutely tear this bait up. The Mag Draft Freestyle 6-inch, also that 6-inch and even 7-inch Scottsboro hand-poured swim bait. Both are awesome baits. We also have a smaller hook on the other end of the spectrum, which is a 2/0 3/16 ounce tush, and that works great with your smaller swim baits, anything from like a 2.8 to a 3.8 style Kitech, a small little 3-inch Megabass Spark Shad, any small swim baits you like. And here's one I have rigged up on my rod actually, that's on a 2.8 Big Bite Baits Pro Swimmer swim bait. The one thing I really like about the smaller tush is that, again, it gives the bait a more compact feel compared to a standard jig head that you would have on this 2.8 swim bait. If you just look at these baits in comparison, you have an extra maybe 1/2 inch of lead that extends the profile of the swim bait, making it a little bit bigger, as opposed to the tush where there's no excess lead and you actually have a true 2.8 inch profile. A lot of times when you go to these smaller swim baits, you're doing it to downsize to the size of the bait fish, and you want to get as small of a bait as you can still cast on standard equipment. I'm throwing this on an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader, 12-pound braided line from Sunline, and a 7'4" medium heavy moderate action spinning rod. So pretty long spinning rod, pretty heavier duty spinning rod honestly compared to a lot of the stuff people throw. And I can still cast this 3/16 ounce 2.8 inch swim bait a mile when I'm fishing offshore. We also have a little bit stouter hook in there, so you could even throw this on a bait caster if you want. And keeping all of that lead hidden away inside the bait gives it a lot more compact profile and gives these fish something, again, they're not used to seeing. They're used to seeing these ball head jig heads all over the place with these eyes, and if they're really keyed in on small bait fish, small fry, and they're getting really picky, the tush can give you an advantage by just giving you a little bit more natural, streamlined presentation. And the last size we have is a 4/0 3/8 ounce tush. This works great in anything from a 3.5 to like a 5 1/4 inch swim bait. I have one rigged up here on a 4.8 Big Bite Baits Pro Swimmer. And one thing I've heard from guys that I've given a few of these to this spring is that this works great as an alternative to a spinnerbait or a chatterbait up shallow. Because the weight is inside the swim bait, it skips extremely well. And also because that bait, as I mentioned earlier, has more body movement. It vibrates more than your standard swim bait, but it doesn't vibrate quite as much as a chatterbait or a spinnerbait. So it's almost like a finessey chatterbait in a way. And guys have been saying they've been crushing them, fishing offshore grass, fishing shallow under laydowns and bushes and all kinds of stuff. And the friends I've given them to have been loving this size specifically just as a search bait, a way to cover water. I don't fish shallow that much myself. I have skipped this around a little bit just in testing, but the way I've actually found to use this 3/8 ounce 4/0 hook is on a hog farmer spunk shad offshore. And I have a video coming this Friday where I caught a big bag of fish on Grand Lake, had a couple 4.5s, 5-pounder, fishing this Jacob Wheeler style. Jacob Wheeler had a really interesting technique he showed off when he was fishing on the Bass Pro Tour on the Tennessee River, and he was basically floating a swim bait over the top of fish. I'm going to call it coasting a swim bait. I don't know if that's the correct term, but that's the term I'm going to use. Coasting a swim bait over the top of offshore bass, and they'll actually come up off the bottom to come eat this thing. And I have a full video showing this off. It's a very unique technique, and this tush works perfect in these straight tail swim baits. Basically, this is it's basically a Kitech with a fluke tail on the end. And I've actually been catching fish in a ton of different scenarios with this rig. Over the top deep brush piles, rock piles, obviously ledges, ditches, and even schooling fish offshore. This is a very versatile rig, and it's something that I feel like is going to work all over the country. It's working on the Tennessee River, it's working here in the Ozarks, and it has a very unique drawing power to it. Definitely subscribe to Fish the Moment so you don't miss my video Friday talking about this, because you definitely are going to want to learn more about this rig. And I would also head over to coretackle.com and pick up some of these tush hooks while supplies last. Last time when we launched the hover rig over on Matt's channel, you guys stocked this out over the weekend. We have a lot more inventory on hand this time because the hover rig has been going pretty well, so we're able to invest in a little bit more inventory, but definitely make sure you go to coretackle.com and check out the tush, because I have a feeling inventories are going to go pretty quick. As a quick recap, again, we have 3 sizes of the tush. We have our 2/0 3/16, a 4/0 3/8, and then the 7/0 3/4 ounce. Don't sleep on this 3/4 ounce 7/0 size, because I know a lot of guys are going to pass up on this. It seems heavy, it seems big, but if you guys like throwing a mag draft or a bigger swim bait in your area of the country, you definitely need to try pairing this hook up with some of the solid body swim baits and just throwing it around on shallow flats, on offshore spots. You can reel these swim baits in pretty quick because it has that 3/4 ounce of lead. It'll track back to the boat really well, and you can catch some big ones on it. This has been a really cool project to work on. Again, we've been working on tush for over a year now, trying to get it dialed in, get it right, make sure we know how it works in a variety of baits. And we feel like we've got it set up so that it can be rigged very easily for you guys, and it can pair with a lot of different baits that are on the market. Definitely leave a comment down below letting me know what you think of tush. We've had a lot of fun with this reveal video. We have some surprises also coming up in the next couple of weeks with some very fun videos that have some plays off of the tush concept that I think you guys will enjoy. So stay tuned to Fish the Moment. Make sure you check out Matt's channel. We may have a interesting couple of other videos on some other channels, so check that out as well. And make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Core Tackle, where you're going to see all of our updates about tush. Thanks again for checking out this video, guys, and thanks to everyone who goes and supports us over at coretackle.com with this new bait. We'll see you guys in the next video.